Washington might have their answer for Damon Williams, whose story says a lot about the bad state of college football.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you all so much, especially my everydayers, for helping make that the case. Auburn lands Byrum Brown, the guy that looked the best at quarterback for Auburn this year, not Jackson Arnold. He's got a new home, and some thoughts on Oregon, Indiana. But first, Roman Tomashoff of Locked On Huskies is here to talk about the story in college football for a second straight day. Roman, I think you are making a historic appearance here. I don't think I have ever had the same guest for the first segment 2 shows in a row. That's how big of a deal this is. But you said on your show, Locked On Huskies, that college football is broken. And I think in some ways, several ways, frankly, that's entirely true. And I'm someone that always tries to be pro-fan. Some people are pro-school, pro-player. I'm pro-fan. And I think stories like this are indeed anti-fan. Because when it's announced that he's going back to the school that he came to with his head coach, granted from a different school because there was a lot of turnover there, and he plays for a year after flashing as a redshirt freshman, and he looks like the guy of the future, and then all of a sudden he's leaving. There are going to be a lot of fans in the Seattle area that are frustrated with Damon Williams, that demonize Damon Williams, and I'm not going to sit here and tell them that they are wrong for feeling that way.
Nor should you. It's something that I talked about over on Locked On Huskies as well, where this is going to just, I think this is something that, you know, if you want to talk about the fan angle here, it's going to have a ripple effect throughout the country, because unless the NCAA comes in and puts some very strict guidelines along things like this, like I didn't say that's going to happen. Let's be very, very clear about that part of this. But it's one of those things where, you know, even for, let's take Damon Williams' favorite target, Denzel Boston. That's a guy who had every opportunity to transfer at several different points. He sat behind one of the best wide receivers in college football for 2 years in Rome Odunze. And then he could have transferred out before the 2024 season. He could have transferred out before the 2025 season. But he stayed loyal to his hometown program and is somebody who developed into a first-round pick here at Washington. And I think that moving forward, guys like that might get lost in the shuffle, because people are going to remember these Damon Williams things more often. And, oh man, well, I don't know if I want to buy a jersey of that guy for my kid. I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if this is the kind of guy that is going to make me want to renew my season tickets or whatever, because of stories of like what Damon Williams just did, turning his back on Washington.
How much of Washington fans' frustration or disappointment should be directed at the Huskies NIL collective? Because according to the reports, there is going to be a sizable offer, and you talked yesterday on the show about the potential bidding war between schools like LSU and Miami. Maybe there's been a lot of buzz about LSU, who still needs a quarterback, and I'll circle back to that in a moment. But do you think at all it's an indictment on where Washington is at from an NIL standpoint?
Absolutely not. I think that none of the blame in any of this scenario can be placed at anyone at Washington. And I think there's a very simple reasoning behind that. It's because Washington signed Damon Williams to a top of the market value. Nobody knew that LSU or Miami or wherever he ends up wanted to come in.
Well, obviously it wasn't the very top of the market.
Well, see, yeah, obviously, right? But also at the time when Pete Thamel reported it, that was in his tweet. Said top of the market value, where it's somewhere between $4 and $5 million. The actual, you know, compensation is sketchy, but if you believe some local radio personalities around here, it was closer to 5. And I certainly do believe that. Like, that's what Brennan Sorsby got at Texas Tech. We know that. The fact that LSU wanted to come in and reset it like that, I don't know how you can point the finger at Washington's NIL collective, because again, the deal got done. How is that anybody's fault here at Washington?
Yeah, it's something that I was wondering about because
I think it's a fair point. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what you're dealing with here, if they were really in the $5 million range, that is a tier 1 offer for a quarterback, and we've seen that not just in this transfer portal cycle, but in past cycles as well. Like, that is towards the top. It's just not the tippy top. Obviously, here's another thing that this situation made me think about, Roman. If he does wind up at LSU, and it's a $6 million offer. That number has been floated around very loosely. But again, if Washington was offering 4 to 5, you have to imagine they're in the 5 to 6 range. If they're offering that much, I think it could indicate that there's something about Sam Leavitt. Maybe it's the injury that he suffered this season, and I don't think he's going to be ready for spring ball. That's what the reports have indicated. Matt Moscona of Locked On LSU has mentioned that. Maybe LSU is just really desperate right now. I think that's how this reads to me, that they went to someone who'd already signed a deal and said, no, we have to get him. We got to give him blank checkbook, make him the highest. I think he'd be the highest paid transfer portal quarterback in this 2026 cycle. Yep. Am I wrong?
No, you're 100% right. So I like where you're going with that, because it's a theory that I've floated and I think makes a lot of sense, because think about another angle of this outside of, Lane Kiffin coming in and all that sort of stuff. I feel like they're just trying to save face in the best way possible after the disaster that Brian Kelly has been over, however long LSU fans.
I don't know that I would actually categorize it as a disaster. It wasn't good enough. Good. Billy Napier was a disaster.
That's fair. I think there's also a different standard there with what Florida has been a little bit more recently. If
that's true.
If we want to split hairs. But I think with let's just say the Brian Kelly fallout then, if that's a better word, it's how can we save face in the best way possible? Let's not only go out and make Lane Kiffin the highest paid coach at this point in all of college football, but no, let's go out and get a guy who his previous coach, and also let's remember that at one time, DeMond Williams was committed to Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. I think it's very important to note that this is one of those things where it can, at least probably in LSU's mind, can reset this program. Be like, hey, look, this is the new era. This is what we're going to have like for at least the next 2 years at LSU. If you're thinking about DeMond Williams, where he's got 2 years of eligibility remaining, this is our short-term solution. And this is going to be, just whatever it is you want to call it, like the window dressing, if you will, to say this is the new era of LSU football.
Yeah, I think the maximum investment and the pressure to win immediately just keeps ratcheting up. I mean, it could go up even higher if Ole Miss beats Miami in the playoff and goes to the national championship game. I tell you. Now, DeMond Williams is someone that you and I have both liked for a long time. He had a good season, still has room to grow, as we mentioned yesterday, because against the elite defenses, the Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon of the world, he struggled. And the offense writ large, I don't think it was all on him, but I think a decent amount of it certainly was. Do you think he's worth a $5 to $6 million deal? Because that's getting paid like you're the number one portal quarterback. And I'm bullish on DeMond Williams. He's the best quarterback currently available. If Sam Leavitt is not healthy. If Sam Leavitt is healthy, I'd actually rather have Leavitt between the two of them. But I don't know what the injury situation is like there. Do you think that he is worth what LSU could potentially be committing here, which would be, hey, you need to come in and win 10 games and go to the playoff right now?
Absolutely, because that's what Washington was expecting. The simple answer is yes. Washington was expecting all of those same things from him. And again, whatever numbers we were just throwing around, $4 or $5 million, if it's worth that, who's to say it's not worth a little bit more in that same discussion?
Yeah, I hear you there. Real quick as well, Bo Prabila visited Washington after all of this happened. The Missouri quarterback, former Penn State, that went into the portal. I was a little surprised at that. His offensive coordinator did leave, so maybe that was a part of it. Kirby Moore, now the head coach in your state over in Pullman. He'll be coaching in the Apple Cup. Coug fans probably just hoping for years to come so that they don't have a fourth head coach in 4 years come 2027. But is Bo Prabila the number one option to replace DeMond Williams?
I don't believe he is. I think that this is one thing where we're going to see several other Power 4 quarterbacks who are in the transfer portal come to Washington over the next week and a half. That's something that I feel very strongly about. I've heard a lot of good things that it's already moving in that direction. I don't know who might be next, but when you just kind of look at some of the top quarterbacks in the transfer portal right now, I think that we're going to see a lot of those guys on campus here in Seattle soon.
Sam Levitt is from the Northwest. He's from Oregon, Westland kid, but from the Northwest. I'm just saying. I'm just throwing. Everybody else has passed on him. I don't entirely know why. Makes me wonder. But Roman Thomas Schaff of Locked On Huskies, always with the latest from Seattle. Roman, appreciate the time. We're going down south to Auburn next because they've got their quarterback of the future. Can Byrum Brown save Auburn football? We'll talk about that next. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at Rocket Money. Let's be real. Managing your finances can feel overwhelming between subscriptions you forgot about, bills that keep going up, and trying to figure out where all your money actually goes each month. It's easy to feel like you're losing control. And who has time to keep track of every transaction and hunt down hidden fees? Nobody. That's where Rocket Money comes in, the personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. You will love how it tracks your subscriptions and lets you cancel them right in the app. And the automatic transaction categorization is a game changer. I'll say that again, mouthful to say and listen to, but it is a game changer. Automatic transaction categorization. You can finally see exactly where your money is going each month, set budgets, and reach your financial goals. So let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All caps, all one word. Check them out and get started on the right financial path today. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Does Auburn finally have its savior? For the sake of my next guest, Zach Blackerby of Locked On Auburn, I hope so. I certainly hope so. Is Byrum Brown that guy, Zach? Is he going to be Devin Dampier Southeast?
I hope so. I mean, you can't hide the production. Just a handful of college football players have ever thrown for 3,000, rushed for 1,000 yards in a single season. You look at the list of these modern guys, it's first-round picks, Heisman finalists, Super Bowl champions, because Jalen Hurts is on there. And then it's Byrum Brown. I do think a lot of people are overlooking this because it was kind of obvious that he was always going to Auburn to follow Alex Golesh, despite reportedly, a few schools being interested, kind of testing the waters to say, hey, would you go anywhere else? But this is a match made in heaven for Alex Golesh and Byrum Brown. They ascended. They outperformed. They leaned over their skis, whatever, saying you want to use for what they accomplished at USF and turning that program around. They said, okay, let's do it in the SEC now. Let's do it in the SEC. Right after Byram's announcement was public, he met with, local media and kind of a scrum out in front of the lobby at Auburn's athletic department. And he just talked about, look, we did this before at USF, and I trust Alex Golesh. He wants to do it here. And I said, let's go. I trust that he can do that. Byrum Brown's making a big commitment here. He knows what's at stake. He knows that he has the ability to really perform if he finds the system that makes sense for him. And so obviously he chose Alex Golesh because he operated in his system over the last few seasons. So the impact could be absolutely tremendous for Byrum Brown and Auburn.
And at least he's coming into a situation where, he knows he's going to be the veteran example for quarterback of the future, Deuce Snot. Oh, wait, no, he's gone.
Nope.
Well, at least he's going to have Cam Coleman to throw the. Oh, no, nope. He's not. Well, at least he's going to have a left tackle who started 12 games last year. Block. No, not gonna do it.
He does have a left tackle who started 12 games 2 years ago at Michigan State. They added Stanton Ramil from Michigan State.
There you go.
That information
Stanton. Good. Good first name.
This name. It's like,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Matt Sheehan, mixed opinions on him, host of Locked On Spartans. But look, I mean, they're bringing all the USF guys down. Essentially his whole receiving core, minus Keyshawn Singleton, who was their leading receiver. There's still talks of, I think Auburn expects for them to land. But Chaz Nimrod, who spent 3 years at Tennessee, then this last season at USF, led USF in yards per reception a year ago, like 20.2 or something. Jeremiah Coger, who was an explosive freshman, was second in receiving for USF last year. Christian Neptune, their starting slot last year. His game's out of this world. Get it? Planet pun? Planet pun? We okay with that?
He's a funny guy.
And then Corey Pettigrew's another guy. I don't think he really plays into the 2026 scheme. And then their tight end from last year as well, Jonathan Eccles coming over. Oh, yeah, and their running back, Davenport, coming over. So, yeah, getting the band back together, all of USF, at least the skill positions, coming up to the Plains, Spencer.
I mean, at least they're good enough to beat bottom tier SEC teams like Florida. So you got
they beat as many SEC teams last year as we did. So
that's got to be a humbling sentence to say out loud.
I've said it a bunch. I'm kind of desensitized to it now, but the first few times it stung a little bit. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, can't really get past. I don't think you can ever fully get past that particular sentence.
What do you think about that? Right, like so. Obviously, Auburn fans are tying. There are parallels, right? It's not the same thing because they've got to do it. But, like the model of just getting guys that fit what you want to do and have the culture. Like we saw Curt Cignetti do this when he brought all these guys from JMU over to Indiana. I'm not saying it's the exact same thing, but it is a similar thing. What do you think about that, Spencer, as far as bringing the culture over? That was a big thing talking about Auburn. Like the culture was messed up. You're having to flip this roster, flip the culture. What do you think about bringing all these South Florida guys to the SEC day one, essentially overnight?
I think it's the safer option if you're Alex Golesh. I don't think that makes it the wrong option. It's the safer option to kick a field goal on 4th and 3 when you're up by 6 to go up 9, when you could instead try to go for it, convert, and go up 13. That has a bigger payoff, but there is real legitimate value in kicking the field goal there. So if you've got a reliable kicking game, you take those points, and I think that's what Alex Golesh is doing here. I think there's a world where in 2 years' time, once a couple recruiting classes, a couple portal classes have come through the program, we look back at year one Alex Golesh and say, wow, that team just wasn't nearly as talented as what, the team he's able to put on the field now. And I still think that it's the right move, even though that's the case. Like you could probably find guys with a higher rating, maybe some better traits. But when you're coming into a situation like Auburn, you do need to have that cultural establishment. You've got to come in and establish your identity as a coach on the field and off the field, and there are no better group of guys to do that with than the guys who just turned around South Florida and made them an American Conference contender. I mean, that program until he got there had been down. They'd been down bad for a long time, long time.
3 years.
Yeah, it had been really, really bad. So I also look at what the modern world of college football presents. And I'm not sitting here telling you the SEC is basically the same as the American just because South Florida, beat Florida
right.
or anything ridiculous like that. But a point I have made repeatedly on my show, Zach, is the gap between the middle of college football and the top of college football is not as big as it used to be. And when you have a proof of concept with a lot of those guys, and you're going to work in some Auburn players and quote-unquote SEC caliber guys who are higher rated and whatnot, I don't see how Alex Golesh doesn't win games in year one. I don't know it's going to result in 9 or 10 wins, but I think expecting 7 or 8 finally for the Auburn Tigers is more than reasonable.
Yeah, I also think the positions he's bringing from South Florida are positions that make sense. Like if he brought the entire O-line or the entire D-line, I'd be like, I don't know. Like physically there's a difference there. But this offense that he runs, it demands speed. You've got to beat guys that are lining up across from you. You got to beat them towards the end zone. And if you're fast at these guys are blazing, right? They've all have elite speed. Like that's going to translate. I'm not worried about that. It's the physicality and the grind week in and week out. And you don't see that as much at the skill positions. And so at this point, there's been no USF trench players. There's been very little trench players at all, which I do have a concern about. That's now my biggest question with this. But as far as the receivers and the defensive backs that they've brought in, and obviously Byrum Brown, I feel great about it. It's just now, okay, can you get that offensive line to block for him? You've brought in Stanton Ramil. Okay, there's some injury questions there, some health questions, but I get it. We need a few more of those guys so they can come in and compete for jobs.
Really quick, Ashton Daniels went to Florida State, and at the end of the year, did some nice things.
He looked good. Yeah.
For Auburn. He looked pretty good. You talked about him as potentially being in contention to be Auburn's starter for Alex Golesh in 2026. Obviously, that's not the case. Right. So he's going to Florida State. What's your read on him going there? As in, like, why is he going there, or why did he leave Auburn, or what kind of what you think he brings to Florida State? Like, should the Seminoles say, yeah, this is our starting quarterback, or is he just kind of a guy you put in the room?
Yeah, I think he's good enough to be a starter. He's going to be an incredible locker room guy. I mean, he came here knowing he was going to be Jackson Arnold's backup, a proven P4 starter at Stanford, who was just okay there. And, you know, Hugh Freeze said it when Ashton Daniels committed. It's like, I think the guys that we're going to have around him are a little bit better than the guys he was playing with at Stanford. And he was right, especially when the offense opened up. What he did against Vanderbilt, what he did against Alabama, extremely productive, both on the ground with his legs and with his arm. It's the best Auburn's offense has looked in a hot minute. And it's a shame it took guys getting fired for that really to get opened up. But in a Gus Malzahn system, it makes sense. It makes sense. He's mobile. He can make good decisions. And I don't think he's a guy that's going to necessarily like lose you a game in a clutch situation. So small sample size as far as what we really got to see from Ashton. The story with him is interesting, Spencer. He, Golesh came in and like met with all the guys. According to some texts that Ashton have like sent fans, or some DMs that Ashton has sent fans, and then people screenshotted and shared on social media and in message boards and all that. And I was told this before it happens. Like, I do believe that this is all true. It doesn't sound like Golesh made any intent to meet with Ashton Daniels. And I think
he probably knew he was going with Byrum Brown.
But I think Ashton would have been fine staying at Auburn as a backup. I think he wanted to be here.
Really?
So little surprised by all that. Yeah. And I mean, there's a handful of fans that don't like how that really played out.
I could see it. I mean, he's a very easy guy to like, really easy going, nice dude, smart kid, just wants to play some football, or, okay, being a backup. I think it's kind of crazy with the tape that he put out there. I mean, he was about to lead Auburn to the win in the Iron Bowl, and then Cam Coleman fumbled.
Who?
I don't know either. Zach Blackerby, Locked on Auburn. I know exactly who he is. He hosts the #1 Auburn Tigers podcast out there. Did you know? Did you know you're #1? Did you have a...
I did.
Do you have an awareness about that? Yeah, that's pretty good. That's because he's a stud. So is Curt Cignetti, and you just cannot overstate how good of a coach that guy is.
Google me.
I will share some thoughts on the actual game between Oregon and Indiana. I just wanted to put Friday night's Peach Bowl semifinal into context, because there is one comparison not that has happened before. Nothing like Indiana has happened in my lifetime. Maybe if you go back to 2007, South Florida was in the national championship discussion, West Virginia, but nothing like this. The Curt Cignetti transformation of Indiana is truly one of the most unbelievable sports stories I have ever seen. If you went back in time right now, and when he got hired, went on the air and told people Curt Cignetti is going to win a Big Ten championship in year 2. He's going to beat Ohio State. He's going to have his team playing at a national championship level. He's going to have the best team in college football with a guy that most of you had never heard of, with a bunch of players that were playing at James Madison, who was an FCS school within the last decade. If I'd told you that, I would have been accused of massive clickbait. rage bait. Because that's how it would have come off. Indiana's going to win a national championship. Yeah, right. Here's one example. Amongst others that could exist, let me just try to put this into perspective. Indiana had never had a 10-win season when Curt Cignetti got hired. Not this century, not this decade, in the history of their program. So he comes in and wins 11 games. Now he's won 14 games and a Big Ten championship. He's beaten Oregon and Ohio State in the same season, in the NIL transfer portal era, where Oregon and Ohio State are Tier 1 spenders and Tier 1 roster and talent acquisition schools. He's beaten them both in the same year. And they've both got really good head coaches who have won conference and national championships in the last couple of years. A good example is actually a guy who's going to coach in this game, and I presume is hoping it's not his last game ever coaching at Oregon, but it could be if they lose. And I think Indiana's going to win, by the way. Will Stein is going to be the head coach at Kentucky. He's from the area. He grew up going to games there. He's been Oregon's OC for 3 seasons. He's an underrated recruiter, really good play caller, quarterback-friendly offense. He's going to have Kenny Minchie, the one-time Nebraska Cornhusker commit. They did all right getting Anthony Calandria. That's not a bad consolation prize there. Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year, former Virginia starting quarterback. But Kenny Minchie's going to Kentucky, probably to be the starting quarterback. Good pickup. Good pickup there. Can you wrap your mind around the possibility of Kentucky winning the SEC championship in 2027 and being the number 1 team in college football? Even if Stein did that, by the way, which I don't believe he's going to, because it's incredible what Cignetti has done, and I don't know that we'll see it again anywhere, it would be less improbable for him to do that at Kentucky than what Cignetti's done at Indiana. The other great turnaround in the modern era is Vanderbilt, who has also been a bottom dweller for a long time. Vanderbilt's rise under Clark Lee has been nothing short of incredible. They beat Alabama in a season where they didn't actually sniff the SEC championship game. They just had probably their best season in program history this past year. They went 10-3. It was a really good year. Clark Lee's doing great. The fans in Nashville should feel over the moon happy that he is still their head coach because they can compete, and we'll see what they wind up doing at quarterback. They flipped Jared Curtis from Georgia, for goodness sake. Nothing makes sense about that particular rise. These programs just elevating themselves up makes no sense. And what Clark Lee has done at Vanderbilt is wildly overshadowed by what Cignetti has done at Indiana. He hasn't just made them good, relevant, competitive, playing in game day games, marquee matchups that people plan their Saturdays around because Vanderbilt was playing at Alabama. That was must-see television, for goodness sake. You wouldn't have ever said that in my entire life. Indiana being here is the greatest coaching job I've ever seen. Curt Cignetti is the best coach in all of college football, whether he wins this national championship or not. That Indiana is the champion of the Big Ten for the 2025 season and 2 wins away from winning it all is unfathomable, and yet it's real. Here we are. So let's pivot and talk about the actual game. Indiana won the first matchup at Autzen Stadium. They were a 7.5-point dog in that game. They're now a 3.5-point favorite, according to our friends at FanDuel. That is correct. Dan Lanning is an outstanding football coach. As an Oregon guy, I can tell you, Oregon fans are very happy to have him in charge because he's really good. He has gotten better every single year as a coach and as a program, as he calls it. So what he's done has been incredible. We know he has 2 really good coordinators because they just got hired to be head coaches. Will Stein to Kentucky, Tosh Lupoi to Cal. I am 100% concerned about that from an Oregon standpoint. This staff that already walked into your home field, a place where Dan Lanning has lost twice during his tenure with the Ducks, including beating the national champions last year, lost to this Indiana team and this staff, who already made their big portal moves with defensive linemen, Nick Marsh at receiver, Josh Hoover at quarterback, amongst others. They got a guy named Turbo from Boston College. They certainly have their attention slightly diverted elsewhere. But one of the reasons I'm taking Indiana to win the football game is not just the clown car of injuries and departures that Oregon's had in the running back room, which I talked about over on today's episode of Locked On Ducks, if you want more thoughts on all of that. They really have two running backs that they've used regularly this year available for this game, and they don't have their best one, who went for over 7 yards a carry in the first matchup with Indiana. Now, the Hoosiers don't have Stephen Daly on the interior. Certainly that matters. The other matchup to watch, though, other than Oregon's ground game to see if they can have success again and use that to complement the pass game, is Bryant Haynes, who better win the Broyles Award for the best coordinator in college football, against Will Stein and Alik Terry, Oregon's OC and offensive line coach. So what those two were unable to do in the first game was prepare Dante Moore for the different complex pressures that Indiana brings to the table. It has been the hallmark of this defense all season long. Oregon hasn't handled it well. Now, against Texas Tech, they didn't face exotic pressures, and they actually, after the first quarter, protected Dante Moore very well. This is a different type of challenge because they're doing it with scheme rather than elite NFL defensive guys, as Texas Tech was able to do. So Oregon has to be able to keep Dante Moore upright. They have to figure out the run game without maybe their best overall back in Jordan Davison. They are using a sixth-year guy in Noah Whittington, who's super experienced, and a true freshman in D.R. Hill. Go figure. The gap between the amount of football played between those two guys, truly something to behold. But Oregon's got to figure out those two things, and they've got to figure out the red zone offense, which in their biggest games this year hasn't been at its best. And that's why I trust Indiana in this spot. I think the Hoosiers, and we'll see whether or not offensive pass interference flags are thrown or not, and how the Hoosiers wideouts can win 50-50 balls. That's going to be a really key small matchup in this game. I'm going for a sicko score just for the fun of it. I think Indiana wins the game. I think the defenses shine 19-13. Yeah, you didn't see that score prediction coming. I think Indiana wins. I think Indiana covers, and I think Indiana goes on to win the national championship. So I apologize to Hoosier fans in advance for giving you the kiss of death, which is me picking your team, apparently. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.